So here's a question to kick things off. What if the Vietnam War, the one that turned jungles into battlefields and American living rooms into protest hubs, never even started? I mean, imagine it. No helicopters buzzing over rice paddies, no Lyndon Johnson sweating bullets on TV, no hippies yelling about peace while secretly wondering if tie-dye was a good life choice. Sounds like a fever dream, right? Or maybe a world where history decided to take a coffee break instead of a body blow. Well, buckle up because we're about to dive into that alternate universe. And trust me, it's going to twist your brain in ways you didn't expect. Let's be real. The Vietnam War wasn't just a war. It was a cultural earthquake, a political mess, and a generation-defining gut punch. Over 58,000 Americans didn't come home. Vietnam got torn to shreds, and the US spent billions that could have built, I don't know, a few extra moon bases, or at least better highways. But what if it all just didn't happen? What if some diplomat in a bad suit waved a magic wand, or at least a decent ceasefire, and the whole thing fizzled out before it began? Would we be sipping cocktails in a golden age right now? Or would the Cold War have found another sandbox to ruin? This isn't just some history nerd's fantasy. It's a what if that hits home. If you're old enough to remember Walter Cronkite breaking the nightly bad news, or if you've ever wondered why your uncle still grumbles about the 60s, this one's for you. We're not rewriting history with aliens or time machines here. Sorry, sci-fi fans. But we're tweaking it just enough to see what shakes out. Picture a world where Nixon never gets his big break, where Vietnam's a tourist trap instead of a tragedy, and where the 60s are less make love, not war, and more make money, not headlines. I'll throw in a few laughs along the way, because if we can't chuckle at Ho Chi Minh's beard or Johnson's ego, what's the point? Stick with me, because this isn't your high school history class. It's a story. Think of it like a chat over coffee with a friend who's got a wild imagination and a knack for digging up the juicy bits. We'll explore how America might have dodged its biggest domestic meltdown, how Vietnam could have skipped the apocalypse, and how the world might have turned out if the dominoes never toppled. It's going to be a ride, part thought experiment, part, wow, really, moment. So grab your imaginary popcorn and let's see what happens when history says, nah, I'm good. All right, let's set the stage. It's the early 60s and the Vietnam War as we know it is about to kick off. The US is eyeballing Southeast Asia, terrified that if Vietnam goes red, the whole region will tumble like a row of dominoes at a bad party. But here's where our story forks. What if the Gulf of Tonkin incident, that sketchy "they shot at us" moment in '64, never happens? Maybe the radar guy had too much coffee and calls it a glitch. Or maybe cooler heads in Washington say, you know what? Let's not. No escalation, no troop surge, just a quiet standoff. Vietnam stays a Cold War footnote, and we're off to the races in a very different world. First up, America. Without Vietnam, the 60s don't turn into a national shouting match. Lyndon Johnson, LBJ, the guy with a drawl bigger than Texas, doesn't have to juggle a war and his great society dreams. No $25 billion a year bleeding into bombs means more cash for schools, hospitals, maybe even that universal health care he kept promising. Imagine him grinning on TV, cutting ribbons instead of dodging draft riots. The anti-war movement? It's a whisper, not a roar. College kids might still grow their hair out, because let's face it, the Beatles were inevitable. But they're not chaining themselves to fences or burning draft cards. Speaking of which, the draft might stick around longer without Vietnam to make it public enemy number one. And Nixon? Poor Dick might never get his shot. He rode Vietnam's chaos to the White House in '68, promising law and order to a country losing its mind. No war, no chaos, no Nixon. Maybe Hubert Humphrey sneaks in, or some other suit keeps the 60s humming along. The Republican Party doesn't get its hard-right makeover yet, and Watergate? Just a fancy hotel name. Funny how one war, or lack of it, can shuffle the whole deck. Over in Vietnam, things get even wilder. No war means no North-South slugfest. Ho Chi Minh, picture him with that wispy beard and a sly grin, might cut a deal. A unified, neutral Vietnam, sitting pretty between the US and the Soviets. Like Switzerland with better foe. No Agent Orange, no napalm, just rice fields and maybe a booming textile trade by the 70s. They could have been the Singapore of the 80s, not a war-torn mess limping into the 90s. And the neighbors? Cambodia doesn't spiral into Khmer Rouge insanity without a war next door to light the fuse. Laos naps through the century. Southeast Asia might just turn into a quiet corner of the world, sipping tea while the superpowers glare elsewhere. The Cold War shifts too. Vietnam was America's big oops moment. It made the US look beatable. Without that, the Soviets might not feel so cocky. Their Afghanistan adventure in '79? Maybe they think twice if America's still strutting around Asia, untarnished. The US military doesn't get humbled either. No post-Vietnam slump means more swagger, more spending. Could have been more proxy wars elsewhere, Central America, anyone? Because nothing teaches caution like a jungle quagmire you didn't have. Now culture, that's where it gets fun. No Vietnam War, no Platoon, no Full Metal Jacket. Hollywood might have doubled down on space race flicks. Think 2001, A Space Odyssey, but with a bigger budget. Music loses some edge too. Creedence Clearwater Revival might still rock, but Fortunate Son isn't the anti-war anthem we know. It's just a catchy tune about rich kids. The '60s vibe shifts from protest to progress. Tech could have jumped ahead. Those war billions might have gone to NASA or early computers. Picture floppy disks in '75, not '85. Your Commodore 64 might have been a Commodore 128. Ooh, fancy. But it's not all rosy. Vietnam forced the US to rethink war. Without it, America might have stayed trigger happy. More interventions, more chest thumping, less, let's talk it out. And Vietnam's peace? It might not last. Communism and capitalism could still butt heads there, just with fewer explosions. The world might have traded one mess for another, just with better hairstyles. So there's your alternate history. America's less bruised, Vietnam's less broken, and the '60s are less of a soap opera. It's not utopia, but it's not dystopia either. Just a different flavor of chaos with a side of irony. What do you reckon? Would we have dodged a bullet or just aimed it somewhere else? So where does this no Vietnam War road drop us off? Picture it. America's got a fatter wallet, a calmer '60s, and maybe a few extra moon landings under its belt. Vietnam's sipping cocktails on the global stage, not picking up the pieces. The Cold War is still a staring contest, but the US doesn't blink first. It's a world where LBJ's remembered as the guy who built stuff, not the guy who bombed stuff, and Nixon's just a trivia question. Who lost to Humphrey in '68? Pretty wild, right? But here's the kicker. Maybe we needed that mess. Vietnam taught us war's not a video game. Without it, we might have kept rolling the dice in every corner of the globe, thinking we're invincible. And Vietnam itself? Peace sounds nice, but neutrality's a tightrope. Ho Chi Minh might have dodged bombs just to wrestle with bureaucrats instead. The '60s might have been tamer, but would they have been better? No draft riots, sure, but also no push to rethink power, no cultural gut check. We might have traded grit for gloss, and I'm not sure that's a win. It's funny, isn't it? One war skips town, and the whole world shifts, like spilling coffee on a map and watching the stains spread. Maybe we'd be richer, less cynical, jamming to space-age tunes instead of protest songs. Or maybe we just find new ways to trip over ourselves. Because if history's taught us anything, it's that we're stubborn like that. I mean, imagine telling Johnson, hey, skip Vietnam, build some schools. He'd probably laugh, adjust his Stetson and say, son, I've got a legacy to chase. This little thought experiment leaves you wondering, how fragile is the world we've got? One decision, a ship not firing, a speech not given, and boom, we're in a parallel lane. Makes you appreciate the chaos we did get, scars and all. So what's your take? Would we be sipping utopia juice right now? Or just sipping something else while the same old problems knock on the door? If you enjoyed this romp through what-if land, hit that like button. It tells me you're into rewriting history as much as I am. And subscribe if you want more. Because who doesn't love a good what might have been story? Drop a comment too. Tell me what you'd tweak if Vietnam never happened. Let's keep the chat going, folks. History's too fun to leave alone. Thanks for hanging out. See you next time when we twist the past again.